filthy old beggar, watch where you're going. Do you have any idea how expensive this dress is?
Oh no, I'm so sorry. It was an accident, ma'am. I didn't mean to.
Don't speak to me. People like you shouldn't even be allowed near decent citizens. Hey, you! Throw her away from my entrance. She's scaring away my customers.
Wait! Please, she has already apologized. What more do you want?
This isn't your business.
It became my business the moment you started treating her like she isn't human. And who are you supposed to be? My name is Sarah.
Sarah carefully placed the last tomato back into the basket before helping the elderly woman stand. Margaret looked Sarah up and down before laughing. Oh, I know you. The bread seller. The single mother. The woman who's always behind on rent. Several people chuckled. Sarah's face turned red, but she refused to look away. Being poor isn't something to laugh at. Margaret smiled coldly. No. But defending beggar certainly is. She reached into her purse, pulled out a $20 bill, and threw it onto the ground. There. Tell your old friend to buy herself some dignity. The bill landed in a puddle. The elderly woman stared at it. Then quietly left it where it was. Sarah did the same. Without another word, she helped the old woman lift the basket. Together, they walked away. Neither of them noticed dozens of phones recording everything. Hidden beneath the old woman's faded sweater was a tiny camera. It had captured every second. Every insult. Every laugh. Every person who chose silence. As they disappeared into a narrow street, the old woman finally smiled. The test has begun. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a moment to like the video and let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you had witnessed that moment in the market? Sarah glanced at the old woman. What did you just say? The woman smiled warmly. Oh, nothing, dear. My name is Evelyn. And thank you. You didn't have to help me. Sarah shrugged. My mother always told me kindness doesn't cost anything. Evelyn nodded slowly. That's becoming harder and harder to find. The two women continued walking until they reached a small park. Sarah opened the cloth bag hanging from her shoulder. I only have 2 bread rolls left. She handed one to Evelyn. You should eat. Evelyn looked surprised. But this is what you sell. I'll bake more tomorrow. And what if you don't sell enough tomorrow? Sarah laughed quietly. I've worried about tomorrow every day for 5 years. If I keep worrying, I never enjoy today. Evelyn accepted the bread with trembling hands. She hadn't heard words like those in a very long time. Most people she met only talked about money. About inheritance. About power. About who deserved what. Sarah spoke about hope. That alone made her different. As they ate, Sarah noticed Evelyn staring into the distance. You have family. Evelyn paused. I do. They are very successful. Sarah smiled. Then you're lucky. Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she quietly changed the subject. And you? My son. His name is Noah. He's 8. The smile on Sarah's face faded almost instantly. He's sick. Evelyn's expression softened. What happened? The doctors say he needs surgery. Sarah looked at the half-eaten bread in her hand. I've been saving every dollar I can. But every time I get close, something happens. The rent goes up. The electricity bill comes. School fees. She laughed, though tears had begun forming in her eyes. It feels like life keeps moving the finish line. Evelyn reached over and gently squeezed her hand. Don't give up. I've seen impossible things happen. Sarah smiled politely. I hope you're right. That evening, After Sarah left for home, Evelyn slowly walked toward a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. She stopped in front of an old warehouse. To anyone watching, it looked abandoned. She knocked 3 times. The heavy metal door opened immediately. Inside, everything changed. The dusty clothes, the worn shoes, the walking stick. They disappeared. Staff members greeted her respectfully. "Good evening, Mrs. Carter. Welcome back." A woman handed Evelyn a tablet. "Today's recordings have already been uploaded." Evelyn watched the footage from the market. Every insult. Every reaction. Every face. Then another screen appeared. It showed her nephew, Daniel Carter. He was sitting inside the Carter mansion with 2 expensive lawyers. One lawyer placed several documents on the table. Daniel signed them confidently. "When my aunt is officially declared missing," Daniel said with a grin, "everything becomes mine." The lawyer hesitated. "Mrs. Carter hasn't been declared dead." Daniel leaned back. "She's been gone for almost a year. No one has seen her. Everyone assumes she's gone. It's only a matter of time." Evelyn quietly turned off the screen. There was no anger on her face. Only disappointment. The family she had built with her late husband was falling apart. Not because they lacked money. Because they lacked character. Her late husband, William Carter, had often said the same thing. "If you want to know who deserves wealth, watch how they treat people who can offer them nothing." After William's funeral, everyone had suddenly become generous. Flowers. Compliments. Phone calls. Visits. It all felt rehearsed. Artificial. So Evelyn disappeared. Only one man knew the truth. Her attorney, Michael Lawson. Together, they had created the perfect plan. She would live among ordinary people. No luxury. No bodyguards. No private drivers. No designer clothes. Only one simple question mattered. Who would still choose kindness when there was nothing to gain? For 11 months. She had watched. She had listened. She had recorded. And so far, most people had failed. The next morning, before sunrise, Sarah arrived at the market carrying baskets of freshly baked bread. She looked around. There was no sign of Evelyn. "That's strange," she whispered. Just then, loud shouting erupted from the other end of the market. Sarah turned. 3 city officers were surrounding Evelyn's vegetable cart. One of them grabbed the cart and flipped it over. Vegetables scattered across the street again. "This spot belongs to the city now," the officer yelled. "You don't have a permit." Evelyn tried to explain. "I've sold here for months. We're changing the rules. You have 1 minute to leave." Sarah dropped her bread basket and ran toward them. She had no idea that stepping into this confrontation was about to change both of their lives forever. Sarah reached the officers just as one of them raised his boot to crush a basket of fresh peppers. "Stop," she shouted. Every head in the market turned toward her. The officer frowned. "Mind your own business." "It is my business," Sarah replied, stepping in front of Evelyn. "She's done nothing wrong." The second officer unfolded a clipboard. "This vendor is operating illegally." Sarah pointed toward the row of stalls across the street. "What about them? They've been here just as long." The officer didn't even look. "They have permission." "No, they don't," several vendors murmured under their breath. The officers ignored them. Evelyn gently touched Sarah's arm. "It's all right, dear. Don't get yourself into trouble because of me." Sarah shook her head. "No. If nobody speaks up, they'll keep doing this to everyone." The first officer's patience ran out. "You have 10 seconds to move." "What if we don't?" Sarah asked. The officer smiled coldly. Then every loaf of bread on your table will be confiscated too. A gasp spread through the crowd. Sarah looked back at her neatly arranged baskets. She had spent nearly the entire night baking. If she lost today's sales, she wouldn't have enough money to buy Noah's medicine. Her hands trembled. For a brief moment, fear won. Then she looked at Evelyn. The old woman's eyes were calm, not pleading, not demanding, simply watching. Sarah took a deep breath. I'm not moving. The officer walked straight to Sarah's store. Without warning, he swept an entire basket of bread onto the dirty pavement. The loaves scattered everywhere. No! Sarah cried, rushing toward them. Children instinctively bent down to help, but the officers pushed them back. No one touches this merchandise. Sarah stared at the ruined bread. Hours of work. Gone in seconds. Tears welled in her eyes. The crowd remained silent. Some looked ashamed. Others quietly walked away, afraid of becoming the next target. Evelyn slowly bent down despite her aching knees and picked up one of the dusty loaves. She brushed it off carefully. It can still feed someone, she whispered. Sarah looked at her in disbelief. You shouldn't have to do this. Evelyn smiled. Sometimes dignity isn't about what happens to us. It's about how we respond. Just then, an elderly fruit seller named Mr. Harris walked over carrying 2 crates. Without saying a word, he placed them beside Sarah. You can use my table. A flower vendor joined him. So can mine. Then another vendor stepped forward. And mine. Within seconds, nearly a dozen market sellers had surrounded Sarah and Evelyn. One woman picked up the remaining bread. Another gathered the vegetables. Someone repaired the overturned cart. The officers looked around. This is obstruction, one of them barked. No, Mr. Harris answered firmly. This is community. For the first time that morning, the officers hesitated. People had stopped being afraid. They were standing together. One officer spoke quietly into his radio before glaring at the vendors. This isn't over. The 3 officers climbed into their vehicle and drove away. As soon as they disappeared, applause erupted across the market. Sarah covered her face as tears rolled down her cheeks. I thought I was alone. Mr. Harris smiled. None of us survived this market alone. Evelyn watched every face carefully. Kindness was contagious. One courageous decision had inspired many others. She silently memorized every person who had stepped forward. Later that afternoon, business was slower than usual. Sarah counted the money in her apron. After paying for flour, she had barely enough left to buy half of Noah's prescription. She sighed. I'll have to explain it to him again. Evelyn looked concerned. Does he understand? Sarah smiled sadly. He's only 8. He keeps telling me not to worry because he'll get better on his own. Her voice cracked. No child should have to comfort their mother. Evelyn lowered her eyes. My husband used to say that the strongest people often carry the heaviest burdens. You must have loved him very much, Sarah said. I still do. What happened? He became ill. Sarah nodded quietly. I'm sorry. Evelyn looked toward the setting sun. Before he passed away, he asked me to promise him one thing. What was it? Never let money decide whose life matters. Sarah smiled. He sounds like a good man. He was the best man I've ever known. At that very moment, across town, Daniel Carter stormed into the executive boardroom of Carter Industries. Several directors immediately stood. Daniel slammed a newspaper onto the table. The front page showed photographs from the market. The headline read, Local bread seller defends elderly vendor against city officers. Daniel barely glanced at Sarah. His eyes were fixed on the old woman standing beside her. "There she is again," he muttered. One board member frowned. "The same woman from last week's supermarket incident." Daniel nodded slowly. "Find out who she is." Another executive looked confused. "She's just an old vegetable seller." "I don't believe in coincidences," Daniel replied. "Everywhere she goes, people start talking. And now she's making headlines. I want a full background check." He leaned closer. "And if she's causing trouble for the Carter name, make sure she disappears from every market in this town." Across the room, Victor Stone smiled. "I may have a solution." Daniel looked at him. Victor spread a large blueprint across the conference table. "We are announcing the market redevelopment project next week. The entire market will be demolished. Luxury apartments, restaurants, retail stores." Daniel studied the plans. "What about the vendors?" Victor shrugged. "They'll figure something out. They always do." Both men laughed. Neither realized the elderly woman they were discussing owned the land beneath nearly every building they planned to construct. That evening, Evelyn returned to the warehouse. Michael Lawson was already waiting. He handed her a folder. "You were right. The officers who harassed the vendors weren't following city orders." Evelyn opened the file. "Who sent them?" Michael took a slow breath. "Victor Stone. And he has Daniel's financial backing." Evelyn closed the folder without saying a word. For months she had hoped greed had merely clouded her nephew's judgment. Now she knew something far worse. He wasn't simply selfish. He was willing to destroy innocent families for profit. Michael looked at her carefully. "Should we stop this now?" Evelyn walked toward the window overlooking the city lights. "No. Not yet. They've shown me what they are willing to do. But I still need to know who people become when standing up for what's right cost them everything." The following morning, Sarah received a sealed envelope at her store. There was no return address. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single notice. Final eviction warning. She had 72 hours to leave her apartment, or she and Noah would be forced onto the street. She folded the paper before anyone could see it. But Evelyn had already noticed the tears forming in Sarah's eyes. Without saying a word, Evelyn knew the hardest test was no longer hers. It had just become Sarah's. Sarah waited until the market closed before unfolding the eviction notice again. The words looked even harsher now. Final notice. Vacate the property within 72 hours. She folded the paper quickly as little Noah ran toward her. "Mom." He threw his arms around her waist. "Did you sell all the bread today?" Sarah forced a smile. "Almost. Does that mean we can buy my favorite soup tonight?" She gently brushed his hair away from his forehead. "I think we can manage that." Noah beamed. "I knew it. Things are getting better." Sarah's heart ached. She wished she could believe him. As they walked home, Evelyn followed several steps behind, pretending to browse the remaining market stalls. She watched Sarah hide every ounce of worry behind a smile so her son wouldn't be afraid. That evening, Sarah tucked Noah into bed. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart. If we ever become rich." Sarah smiled. "That's a big dream. I don't want a big house. No. No. I just want you to stop crying when you think I'm asleep." Sarah froze. She turned away before he could see the tears filling her eyes. "You've been pretending too," she whispered. Noah nodded. "No do," she whispered into the night. "I've tried everything." A familiar voice answered from behind her. "You don't have to carry every burden alone." Sarah looked up. "Evelyn." The elderly woman held 2 steaming cups of tea. "I thought you might need company." Sarah accepted the cup, trying to smile. I'm sorry you had to see me like this. We all have moments when life feels heavier than we can carry. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, Sarah handed Evelyn the notice. I've got 3 days. If I pay the rent, Noah won't get his medicine. If I buy the medicine, we'll lose our home. I've spent hours trying to decide which one matters more. Her voice broke. What kind of mother has to choose between those two things? Evelyn gently took her hand. The kind who's doing everything she possibly can. Sarah wiped away her tears. It doesn't feel like enough. Evelyn looked toward the dark street. Years ago, someone I love told me something I've never forgotten. What was it? When life forces you to choose between fear and kindness, choose kindness. It may not solve the problem immediately, but it will never leave you ashamed of who you became. Sarah looked down. I've tried to live that way. I know. But sometimes I wonder if kindness is only for people who can afford it. Evelyn smiled softly. No. Kindness costs the most when you have the least. Before Sarah could answer, headlights swept across the apartment building. A black luxury SUV stopped outside. 2 men in expensive suits stepped out. One carried a leather briefcase. The other held a camera. They walked directly toward Sarah. Mrs. Sarah Johnson. She stood cautiously. Yes. We represent Blake Development. Sarah's expression tightened. What do you want? The taller man opened the briefcase and removed the document. We understand you're behind on your rent. Sarah said nothing. We'd like to make you an offer. He slid a check across the table between them. Sarah stared at the amount. $50,000. Her eyes widened. I don't understand. There's only one condition. What condition? The man pointed toward Evelyn. Tomorrow morning, television reporters will be covering the city's new redevelopment project. We want you to publicly state that this woman has been encouraging vendors to protest illegally. Sarah's face fell. That's not true. It doesn't have to be. You'll receive the money immediately. The second man smiled. Enough to pay your rent. Enough for your son's surgery. Enough to start over. Silence hung in the air. Evelyn didn't say a word. She simply watched Sarah. This wasn't a test of poverty anymore. It was a test of integrity. Sarah looked at the check. Then she thought about Noah. His medicine. His surgery. His future. Slowly, she picked up the check. The 2 businessmen exchanged satisfied smiles. But instead of putting it in her pocket, Sarah tore it cleanly in half. Then she tore it again. And again. The pieces fluttered onto the sidewalk. You should leave, Sarah said, her voice steady. The taller man stared at her in disbelief. Do you realize what you've just thrown away? Sarah met his eyes without flinching. No. I know exactly what I refuse to sell. The man's expressions darkened. This decision will cost you. Sarah nodded. It probably will. But I'd rather lose my home than lose my conscience. As the SUV drove away, Evelyn looked at Sarah with quiet admiration. For the first time in nearly a year, she had found someone who chose honesty over a fortune. But neither of them noticed the small camera hidden inside the SUV. Someone else had been watching. And by morning, Sarah's decision would reach the one person Evelyn had hoped to keep in the dark. Daniel Carter. The next morning, the entire town was talking about Sarah. Not because anyone knew she had refused $50,000. But because someone had carefully edited the security footage. The video began with Sarah standing beside Evelyn. Then it abruptly cut to the torn pieces of the check scattered across the sidewalk. A bold headline flashed across the screen. Local bread seller rejects city assistance. The truth had been twisted. By 8 o'clock, customers who usually lined up at Sarah's bread stall were whispering behind her back. "She's becoming difficult. I heard she started those protests. They say she's working with that old woman." Sarah pretended not to hear them. She arranged her bread one loaf at a time, forcing herself to stay focused. Evelyn arrived a few minutes later, carrying her vegetable basket. She immediately noticed the empty stall. "Business is slow today." Sarah managed a weak smile. Rumors travel faster than good news. Before Evelyn could reply, a black luxury sedan stopped across the street. Daniel Carter stepped out wearing an expensive tailored suit. The market instantly fell silent. Everyone recognized the heir to the Carter fortune. Daniel slowly walked between the stalls, barely acknowledging the greetings people offered him. His eyes never left Evelyn. "So," he said with a faint smile, "you're the famous vegetable seller." Evelyn looked at him calmly. "And you must be Daniel." Sarah looked from one to the other. "You know each other?" Daniel chuckled. "No. But I've heard quite a lot about her." He circled Evelyn as though examining a suspicious object. "My advisors tell me you seem to appear wherever trouble begins." Evelyn smiled gently. "Perhaps trouble simply likes following people who create it." Several vendors exchanged nervous glances. Daniel's smile faded. "Careful. I didn't come here to argue." "Then why did you come?" Sarah asked. Daniel turned toward her. "I came to help." He reached into his jacket and produced a polished business card. "Carter Industries is launching a new commercial center. We'll need reliable staff." He looked directly at Sarah. "People who know how to work hard." Sarah frowned. "What about everyone else in this market?" Daniel shrugged. "Progress requires sacrifice." Mr. Harris stepped forward. "So we're the sacrifice?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he faced the crowd. "In 1 month, this market will close permanently." Gasps spread through the square. Compensation applications can be submitted online. One elderly vendor raised his hand. "I don't own a computer." Another spoke up. "I can't read." A third vendor added quietly. "My entire family depends on this store." Daniel's expression never changed. "I'm sure you'll adapt." He turned to leave. Then Evelyn spoke. "Your uncle built this town by investing in people. You seem determined to replace them." Daniel stopped walking. "My uncle is dead." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "No. The man who taught you compassion may be gone. But his lessons didn't have to die with him." Daniel laughed coldly. "Compassion doesn't build skyscrapers." "No," Evelyn replied. "But without it, skyscrapers become empty." For a brief second, Daniel's confidence wavered. Something about the old woman's voice felt strangely familiar. Before he could think about it, his phone rang. He answered immediately. "What?" His confident expression disappeared. "What do you mean another investor pulled out?" He listened for several seconds before ending the call. Annoyance flashed across his face. Without another word, he climbed into his sedan and drove away. Sarah exhaled slowly. "I've never seen anyone speak to him like that." Evelyn looked toward the departing car. "He isn't beyond saving." Sarah stared at her. "After everything he's doing, the easiest people to hate are often the ones who are most lost." Just then, a young delivery rider rushed into the market carrying an insulated medical bag. "Sarah Johnson." Sarah's heart skipped. "I'm here." The rider smiled. "I was told to deliver this urgently." He handed her the package and a sealed envelope. Sarah opened it. Inside were Noah's heart medications. Enough for 3 months. Her hands trembled. There must be some mistake. I couldn't afford this. The rider shook his head. They've already been paid for. By who? I'm sorry. The donor requested to remain anonymous. He left before Sarah could ask another question. Tears filled her eyes as she held the medicine against her chest. This can't be real. Evelyn smiled quietly but said nothing. She had made the payment before sunrise through one of the foundation's charities, making sure no one could trace it back to her. Watching Sarah's relief reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place. But across the street, hidden behind the tinted windows of another parked car, Victor Stone lowered a pair of binoculars. He had witnessed everything. The medicine. He muttered. So someone is helping her. He picked up his phone. Find out who's funding Sarah Johnson. And while you're at it. His eyes narrowed on Evelyn. I want every detail you can uncover about that old woman. As the call ended, Victor smiled to himself. He believed he was getting closer to exposing a harmless street vendor. He had no idea he was beginning a game with the one woman capable of destroying everything he had spent years building. Rain began falling just after noon. Within minutes, the market was covered with umbrellas, plastic sheets, and hurried vendors trying to protect what little they had left to sell. Sarah stretched a tap over her bread table. Mr. Harris, she called. Your fruit. The elderly vendor struggled to cover his crates before the rain soaked everything. Without thinking, Sarah rushed over to help him. Evelyn smiled quietly. Even on the hardest days, Sarah still noticed other people's problems before her own. Suddenly, the screech of tires echoed through the market. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop. The doors flew open. Nearly a dozen men in matching jackets stepped out. Their leader unfolded an official-looking document. Attention! The market gradually fell silent. By order of the City Redevelopment Authority, this property is now under emergency inspection. Confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Mr. Harris frowned. Emergency inspection. We've never had one before. The leader ignored him. All vendors must stop selling immediately. No exceptions. A woman carrying flowers stepped forward. But this is how we feed our families. The man remained expressionless. Not my concern. Sarah exchanged a worried glance with Evelyn. Something didn't feel right. The inspectors weren't checking permits. They weren't examining stalls. Instead, they began marking tables with bright red paint. 1, 2, 3. Every stall received the same symbol. Sarah watched one of the inspectors quietly whisper to another. This entire place comes down tomorrow night. Her heart skipped. Tomorrow. They had been promised 1 month. Mr. Harris heard it too. You lied to us. The inspector immediately straightened. I don't know what you're talking about. You just said. I said nothing. Before the argument could continue, a loud voice interrupted. Everyone, please remain calm. Victor Stone climbed onto a temporary platform holding a microphone. He wore an expensive raincoat and smiled as cameras surrounded him. My friends. I know this is difficult. But progress always requires sacrifice. Boos erupted across the market. Victor raised both hands. In return, every registered vendor will receive financial assistance. Sarah called out from the crowd. What about the vendors who aren't registered because your office kept rejecting their applications? The smile on Victor's face faded. They should have followed the rules. Mr. Harris shook his head. We tried. You rejected us 3 times. More voices joined in. My paperwork disappeared. They kept asking for new documents. I've been waiting 6 months. Victor glanced toward the television cameras and forced another smile. I'm sure these are isolated misunderstandings. Evelyn quietly watched him. Every word sounded rehearsed. Every answer avoided the truth. Then Victor spotted her. There she is. His smile became colder. The woman encouraging unrest. Several cameras immediately turned toward Evelyn. Victor pointed directly at her. This market has been peaceful for years. Then she arrived. And suddenly everyone is protesting. Sarah stepped forward. That's a lie. Victor looked at her. You've already chosen your side. I chose the truth. No, Victor replied. You chose trouble. He signaled one of his assistants. The assistant wheeled out a large display board. Pinned across it were printed photographs. Pictures of Sarah and Evelyn talking. Working together. Sharing lunch. Helping vendors. Victor addressed the cameras. These individuals have been organizing resistance against lawful redevelopment. The crowd gasped. Sarah couldn't believe what she was seeing. There are pictures of two friends talking. Victor ignored her. We cannot allow emotional manipulation to stand in the way of economic growth. Evelyn finally spoke. You seem very afraid of two women with vegetable baskets. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Victor's jaw tightened. I'm afraid of misinformation. No, Evelyn answered calmly. You're afraid people might begin asking questions. The reporters immediately turned their microphones toward Evelyn. The real nightmare had only just begun. If you're already enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe.